Hey there viewers, my name's Torinski and welcome to a very special DCSS stream because today we're going to be trying out our hand at a little bit of tournament play for the first time in my DCSS career, lifetime. I never know what to call it because it's not technically a career, but it's been long enough that it feels like it definitely is so. And hey Ned, how's it going? Hope your day has been fantastic so far. And yeah, I guess without too much further ado, we can pretty much start hopping into it. Not necessarily into a run, but even taking a quick peek at some of the tournament things, some of the scoring that we might want to be reaching out for here. Because a lot of these are going to be just ambient throughout, things like exploration, unique harvesting, even winning, hopefully. We'll probably just ambiently accrue some points over the course of our adventures, but there are a couple categories, one being Nemelex's choice here, that we can make a bit more of an active approach to try and fulfill some. So if we pop this open here, we can take a quick look and see that this category selects a bunch of class, species, or I guess background species combinations that are in the lower win rate categories on the online servers, as well as hadn't been used before in previous tournaments, or at least not in the last one, it looks like it says here. But regardless, it takes these kind of lesser used, lesser won combos and forces players to try it out and trying their very best to get a win with them. So this could be a fun way to try and force ourselves into cubby holes that we might not otherwise have played, and in doing so, and by extension, maybe find a fun thing or have some silliness. No, I agree that, yeah, it's super awesome that they hold these. It's definitely at least one a year and occasionally more than that, depending on if there are, there's a release as well as maybe another event of some significance in the community. I think they've had up to 2 or 3 a year, or in a single year in the past at the very least. But yeah, I've never tried my hand at it personally, largely because I mostly have played a large portion of DCSS on the offline version. But what better opportunity to try my hand at it for the first time than online here? And in fact, I should have set up a command before we start this out here, because for anyone out there that might want to try their hand at this tournament thing for the first time, there are clans that you can join. And so I set myself up with a bit of a clan here, just in case anyone wanted to join in with us. And if we take a look, I believe we just edited our RC file here. Right, I named this right after I was watching through some of our recent halfling plays. So my team name is Riffling's Regrets, because that's the amazing run that I threw away for absolutely no reason, just trying to be a little fancy with fog scrolls. And so far it's just me and the team, but yeah, if anyone is interested in joining, definitely just let me know on one of the streams and I'll add your name to the list here. I believe if you want to join, you just have to do a #team-captain and my name. So yeah, I guess I'll put that out there just in case there's any interest. But of course, no pressure to join. And if you do join, no pressure to get in too much playtime or anything like that. I'm not trying my very best to be the top of any leaderboards. I don't expect to get that far, especially since I'm already quite a bit behind. If we take a look, even in Nemelex here, we see Yermak, who's one of the most popular players of the game because they've set a lot of records and they do well in every single tournament from what I understand. But even all of these players are doing a pretty solid job so far. But regardless of all that, I guess it's time that we start maybe deciding what we want to run for our very first run on camera here, our very first attempt. So if we pop back into the web tiles here, we go into the current release. It's kind of nice because no matter what, if you're playing on web tiles in the current version, you're always going to be participating in the tournament, even if you're not trying to. So for all you know, if you've been playing web tiles at all, you might already have points. You might already be beating me and ahead in many ways. But so you see we have a couple of small changes based on or compared to our usual version that we've been playing on our DCSS Sundays. Hound Tongas have moved down to the simple category from intermediate, and taking their place here are the genie species, or is the genie species. They have innate spellcasting, so instead of picking up books and choosing which spells you learn, they get their entire starting book memorized right off the bat. And then every few levels, I think they get a random spell added. And instead of having to split your experience between all the different spell schools, it's just spellcasting for them at a really bad aptitude, mind you. And yeah, you can just slowly but surely work your way up, and you're generally able to cast whichever spells are handed to you throughout the course of the game. So, to start us off here, I'm torn between jumping in with a genie. It would be my second attempt ever with playing as the species myself, because I did do a quick test trial run on the web tiles here to see if I could manage to get through, because it is a little bit different from the offline versions in that we have to be fairly comfortable with all of the control schemes themselves on the keyboard. You lose a bit of the mouse utility, as we'll see as we start going in. But that is just to say, I'm torn between starting a genie or jumping in as something that we may not get to for a little bit in our Win with Every Species series, that being one of the advanced buddies here. So right now, vampires are the Nemelex choice, so we could go with a vampire hunter. Could be fun. Or the third and final option that I'll put out, because I don't want to overwhelm myself with too many choices. I'm no good with those. Third option is probably going to be to go in with an octopode, because I really enjoy playing as this species, and it's always exciting to try and see what mass array of artifact rings you can come out with and get some really fun effects going. Plus it helps that they're a little bit squishier, so if I'm gonna run one, it'll probably either make the distance or it'll be cut down pretty early on in the run and give us time to maybe try out something else today. And so I'm gonna maybe let this sit for a few seconds. Of course, yeah, if there are any opinions, definitely feel free to pipe up and chat, but if not, no worries whatsoever. And we will just pick one of the three here to go in with today. No matter what to start out, we will be getting some tournament points as long as we're able to pull through with a win. Or, I guess, well, I maybe wait just a second for people to filter in. You can also take a look at the banners here, which all give points based on which tier you manage to hit with them. So Explorer, again, going to be fairly ambient. Pretty much have to just play the game and go for all the rune branches that we can. But then some you'll definitely have to try for. Heretic, you're abandoning gods mid-run, trying to get through the wrath period as well. There's the wind streaking category, which not super hopeful for me, especially as we try and get used to some of the changes in 0.27, but could definitely try it out. Politician, also not likely for me. I'm not exactly a high score champion by any stretch of the imagination. Let's keep it looking pious. We'll probably do ambiently throughout, especially since I like to switch up gods pretty often. We'll probably go with early altars to just experiment, play around a wee bit. And you do like the sound of Vampire Hunter, even though that sentence usually implies the vampires being hunted. I do love that. That's clever. But I've also never really seen an octopode run or you've never seen an octopode run yourself. Well, you can definitely try to get both in at the very least. But maybe we'll start out with Vampire Hunter. You need to make sure to put that proper amount of pause in there so that it's not a Vampire Hunter, it's a Vampire Hunter. But what else can we maybe look for? Worshipping a Faded Altar could definitely be something that we try out that's a little different from our usual. And a bunch of these are definitely a bit trickier to reach. The Lord of Darkness upgrades you're going through without going to some of the classic first areas. Instead of grabbing your first two runes from the S branches and Lair, you skip that part of the game completely and you're diving straight into the Hells or Pandemonium for all of your 3 runes that you need for, minimum 3 runes, I guess, that you need for a victory. So, I guess, take a break from this and let's hop in, starting with our vampire here. Don't have to worry quite as much as usual about coming up with clever names or anything like that, because on the web tiles we will just be Torinski the whole way through. But here we go. We don't start with great aptitudes in any specific hunter department, so it makes sense why this combination might not be as popular amongst the wins that you see on web tiles. Oh, whoops. My mute button also backs us out of that. That's good to know. Let's try that again, shall we? But even with the kind of not so great aptitudes, I think throwing gives us some decent utility where we don't have to lean into the hunter aspects. We can kind of play however we desire to and just use the nets as maybe an auxiliary way to keep alive in the early game. In fact, I think that sounds pretty solid to me, just on its own. And so, here we go. Start off our journey. Of course, we do all the usual things. And like I mentioned, I don't think I'm going to lean too far into throwing right off the bat here. And in fact, we might want to just try and amp up our stealth score pretty quickly here in order to avoid some of the tougher earlier fights, as well as maybe get some lucky backstabs and keep our experience cranking up. I mean, that +5 aptitude in stealth is pretty incredible. And what else? Dodging can go off for the time being. Maybe we'll leave fighting on just so that we're gaining somewhere. At least, or at the very least, until we find maybe a weapon that we'd like to switch to. But we'll see how it goes here. Vampires in general, I'm trying to remember all of the specific things that we have to keep an eye out for. I mean, being able to see invisible. Nice right off the bat here. Razor Sharp Teeth, I think, gives us an auxiliary attack that heals us when we hit. And being inflicted with vampirism gives us a bit of an interesting property here, because if we open our ability menu, we can exsanguinate. So we can drain ourselves of all blood, and this turns us into our undead mode. So as a human, or as a living vampire, I guess as it were, we regenerate health quickly. We don't get any special resistances, but we're pretty robust, pretty stable, pretty much a normal character. If we exsanguinate, drain all of our blood out, we turn fully undead, and that gives us all the usual undead resistances, completely resistant to all types of poison, as well as, I think, a couple of other small things, torment, immunity, things like that. But it does leave us a little bit squishier, I believe, is the main trade-off there. And there's definitely a bit of an issue with switching too often, because when you switch between the two, or maybe it's just one way or the other, man, I'm not quite as brushed up as I normally am. I always like to look up the species before we play them on our Sundays. But that is just to say that I believe there is a drain mechanic that prevents you from switching too often back and forth between the two states. And so in my limited vampire experience, it's mostly useful for getting that resistance to poison if you're not able to find it by a certain point in the game. Or you can also, I believe as a vampire, you can turn yourself into a bat, and that gives you extremely low health, but very high evasion and very high speed. So you can kind of use that to retreat, again with some meta penalties put on you for that bat transformation in order to balance it out, make sure that we're not just constantly doing that at every opportunity. But a short sword of venom is definitely a nice find early on in the dungeon here, so we'll switch out to that. And that might even convince me to start putting a little bit of our experience into short blades, maybe with the future goal of switching into long blades by a certain stage in the game. In fact, that actually sounds great to me, even just kind of mulling it over in my head. So let's turn off fighting for the time being, and we'll turn on short blades. Making sure maybe to set our skill targets to that to 12 so that we don't overtrain too much. Seeing as how, yeah, by the time we get to the stronger enemies in the game, we probably will want to be using a slightly higher base damage weapon like a long blade of sorts. Ooh, and here we go. We immediately find ourselves running into a fated altar. So unknown god here, we have no idea what we'd get by worshipping them, but we do trade that off by getting some bonus piety right off the bat. And it's also one of the banners for the tournament. So why don't we try it out here? I'm always happy to randomize a little bit, especially since we're already looking a little random with our Nemelex choice thing. So let's try it out. And we start out with Okawaru. not the best, but definitely not the worst by any stretch of the imagination. A very just all-around solid god choice for most starting characters. So I'll definitely take that very early on too. So we'll be ramping up that piety, hopefully getting some really decent god gifts by a much earlier stage in the game than we normally would. Lucky, last time you used a Fated Altar, you got Jivia and instantly quit. Haven't used one since. That is rough. I know the kind of classic example of screwing yourself over is doing a spellcasting start, or even playing as something like the new Genie, and then Fated Altering into Trog, and just completely throwing away everything that you've done up until that point. I mean, fortunately, it's usually pretty early when you're going to be taking a Fated Altar, but it's still pretty rough to have to gear shift to that much of an extreme. And good luck in the tourney. You've been watching my content on YouTube and really like the Chill Labs. Thanks for putting it out there. No problem whatsoever. Thank you so much for watching and for the lovely compliment as well. I appreciate it a whole lot. And I definitely hope that we can do some decent work here in the tournament. Starting out with Natasha here. I just, on this previous Sunday, semi-decided that we'd be trying our best to potentially keep Natasha alive, not murder the poor cat that's just doing their very best to find their master down here. It's not their fault that they attack the random stranger that comes crawling out of the darkness. So I'm gonna leave that area alone for the time being, and we'll switch to another stairway here, hopefully avoiding Natasha, and we can always just go down to the next floor, hopefully not continually stacking on new issues or new reasons to skip the next few levels of the dungeon. And as for our skills here, where do we want to go? I usually like my vampires as spellcasters, so we could switch into that since we only took Hunter to fulfill the Nemelex choice criteria, as it were. So start cranking up intelligence, or go for the kind of standard route, sword and board, pretty straightforward. And I think I kind of convinced myself to maybe do a switch into the more spellcaster type focus at some stage in the game at the very least. And you will have seen that with that last level, we did finally officially gain the ability to turn ourselves into a bat while we're in the undead vampire form. So we'll try our best to keep that possibility in mind and maybe save our lives sometime in the future. Hello, Kobold, come down here, please. Perfect. We're still managing to avoid Natasha. It gets a little bit tricky when we're playing on web tiles, because in the offline version of the game, I know that I always kind of try my best to keep an eye on where the auto explorer is taking us, and you can always hit a key in a panic to stop yourself, but as you'll notice when we do an auto explorer, it kind of calculates all the moves ahead of time and just takes us to the next point of relevance, as it were. So we have to be a little more proactive than usual in maybe marking off where we want to avoid here. Fortunately, with our high stealth score, I'm hoping that we can just completely avoid even waking up Natasha. We'll see how it goes, of course. You can fix that in your RC file. You do it for that exact reason. So what exactly is the solution there? Can you change it to be the same type of live play as the offline mode? Because yeah, I've definitely stayed away for the most part from editing RC, but probably should get into that at some stage, especially to maybe try and avoid some of the pitfalls of switching over to online. Though I never mind learning a couple new mechanics, especially in this game. I feel like it puts me on my toes and makes me maybe play actually a little better than normal just because I'm being proactive. But that is definitely a good thing to keep in mind, so we can just add that line. Nice. Yeah, we might have to try that out in the future here, even on the next run today, if our vampire has issues. For all I know, we're just going to breeze through the entire time here. Ideally, right? But no, definitely thank you so much for the RC suggestion, because I'm not very experienced in that department, and I wouldn't know what kind of options are out there for the most part. I know you can change like your auto stop or your auto fight stopping point in terms of your level of health and things like that, but there are, I'm guessing, so many options as to what you can kind of configure and mess around with in that RC file, which is really cool. You have so much faith, love to hear it. I live and breathe off the faith of all of you lovely people, keeping us positive and optimistic through our journeys. Especially when we're, trying out something a little less regular for me, something that we might have some concerns with at the very least. Now, I will say that the transforming nature of vampires very much interests me, because the one thing I have noticed, again, in my more limited experience playing as them, is the ability to use your transformations from live to undead versions of yourself in order to kind of shift which branches you're able to handle at any given point in the game, which is pretty cool. Oh yeah, you made an entire new minimap color scheme. That's really cool. What kind of changes did you make there in order to just make it a little more legible on site, I'm guessing, for you? Because that's really cool. I'm guessing that's also where somebody could potentially make any changes for accessibility things as well, which would be sweet. Are there any colorblind issues or anything like that? Of course, that's kind of the beauty in general of an open source game, is the kind of modification capabilities of it all. But, you know, I'm running away from the Sky Beast. I should have potentially checked it out. But, okay, as I suspected, looks very scary at this stage in the game. So I think I'm going to continue to run for the time being. The nice thing about the web tiles version here, comparative to playing offline, is whenever we see enemies in this bottom right-hand corner, we're immediately shown everyone in sight as well as their threat level, but based on the color of text that we're seeing there. So it does give, especially for new players, a bit more of a on-site example of where you might be running into something, slightly earlier than usual. That's an early Sky Beast. I thought so, but, you know, I'm always ready to doubt myself, especially with any version changes or anything like that. But looks like we made it completely out of there in one piece, and we can just head upstairs. Head down to the last of the unexplored stairways, hopefully not waking up Natasha. We'd like her to just sleep in peace here. And yeah, you made our doors more obvious and got rid of floor loot. Made some colors more logical for things as well. That's very cool. Again, just love the customizability of it all. Opens it up for people for sure. Okie dokie. Sky Beast, please don't stumble upon us anywhere here. Like to just do some nice little exploration shenanigans. Even if we do run into it, at least it's not a fast monster, so we do have a lot of flexibility in terms of just retreating for the time being, which is, as always, one of the most valid solutions to problems in this game. Anytime you can't handle something, it's almost always best to just run away for the time being, live to fight another day, because you'll always get stronger as you slowly but surely make your way through the dungeon. That even kind of plays into the thing that I was talking about just a moment ago, where you can use the vampire transformations to shift which areas of the dungeon you're working on. Because I had, Vampire Ice Elementalist on the go, and they're having troubles in the mid-game for sure, about like by the end of layer or so, starting to really run into some issues. But just by switching back and forth and like going through this branch, then that branch, a wee bit each way, slowly but surely I was bringing all my skills up to be on par to actually make it through one of the S branches. So always want to be ready and willing to change things up, keep flexible in general.